Okay, go ahead.
I'm Jennifer Witham, and I am Program Administrator for Faculty Development at the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. And something I've been thinking about a lot and trying to conceive of is student success. And one of the things that I think we use a lot at the State Board is completions. So how many students complete. And I think that that's a good measure, and it's an important measure, and it's got a lot of complexities to it. But I also think that the part that maybe we don't talk about as much, and it's still relatively new, is ensuring student learning. And the latest large-scale change initiative that we're entering into as a state is Guided Pathways, and it's 4 basic design principles that are really about improving completions. And the 4th design principle is ensuring student learning. And that's the piece that I think we can't talk about completions without talking about what students are learning, who is learning, who's not learning, how are they learning, what can we do better. All large-scale change initiatives are really about improving educational quality, and that's why I think talking about ensuring student learning is really closely linked to student success.
Can you talk about a time you felt successful as a student personally?
Yeah. I'm hoping you're going to edit this. Can you turn it off for a second, then
Sure.
turn it back on? Just, if you just start recording, I'll
We're
stop.
rolling.
Okay. So one of the things, I went to a very small private liberal arts college, and I had
Go.
Actually.
Okay.
Okay. I went to a small private liberal arts college, and I went into the college with a 2.5 GPA from my high school, and I didn't know the term intrusive advising at that time, but before I made any academic decisions, I had to meet with my advisor. She had to sign off before I could get my code to register for classes, and my school prided itself on making sure that students graduated in 4 years with a minimal amount of student loan debt. And they just really advertise that all the time, that 98% of our graduates complete, and they complete with this degree. And so it was very interesting for me then to go to graduate school at a large state institution and realize that there was not that constant monitoring, there was not that attention from a disciplinary advisor. And I was just very fortunate that every time I wanted to sign up for classes, I had to go talk first to a full professor who knew me, who I'd taken classes with her, and she really cared about me as a person, she cared about me as a scholar, and she cared about my future. And so now that I work in our 2-year college system and I think about student success, I always think about how my school designed so well. That did not stop me from experiencing some considerable failures as a student, and I think one failure in particular happened early on in my college career, and I was taking a chemistry class, and I just didn't know, I didn't have the quantitative reasoning skills, I didn't have the math background, I didn't have the discipline, and I also didn't understand at the time what it meant to persist in the context of chemistry. And so there was one activity where the professor gave us a copy of the periodic table with pieces of it missing and asked us to fill in the places of the periodic table that were missing, using the information that was present to us. And I couldn't figure out the answer. I still couldn't do that activity. And that has always stuck with me as a moment of significant failure as a student. And if I could, I would, now I know a lot of really talented chemistry faculty, and I've always thought it would be really fun to go and sit down with one of them and ask, what would it look like to problem solve this? Like, what would I need to do to go from not knowing to sort of knowing to knowing how to complete this problem?
Any other thoughts about student success you want to share?
Yes. So this is complicated. I took an undergraduate class in acting, and this was my junior year, I think, or my sophomore year, and we didn't do any acting like the whole quarter. We did Tai Chi, we did yoga, we did Feldenkrais movements, and I remember thinking the whole time, like, when are we going to get to the acting? When are we going to get to the acting? And finally we were like, can we do some acting? And he gave us scenes to do. And it's interesting, but he was trying to get us to do other things that would be important for us to be really good actors. Like, how do you center yourself? How do you quiet your mind? How do you control your body so that you could then take on other personalities or other voices or other, just how do you become really quiet, really still, really focused so that you can then do the thing you're supposed to do. And so over my lifetime, I've developed a yoga practice. I still do Feldenkrais movements. I don't do Tai Chi anymore, but I'm sure it'll show back up. But one of the biggest things that I know as a teacher and as a scholar is mindfulness. And so it was interesting for me that one of the most successful courses I took, one of the most successful and impactful professors I took, wasn't actually teaching his discipline. So he was teaching his discipline, but it wasn't what I thought from a beginner what he should be doing for the basics. And so when I think about the paradoxes around student success, that's one of them that always stays with me. I don't know.
Rolling.
One of the things that we track at the State Board are equity gaps. And we look at the common course numbered courses, the courses that we know are taught across the system, and we have data around who is completing those courses and who is not completing those courses, and it's disaggregated by ethnicity. And one thing that we know is that our completion rates are not equitable, that there are equity gaps. And I think although we don't have data around the student learning, I think we also know, or we can imply, that learning is not equitable in our classes either, that there are certain people who are learning and certain people who are not learning. And so, and there are reasons, there's so many complex reasons why. And so one of the things that I think about a lot when I think about equity and student success is that equity is not equality. And I think that's been one of the hardest things for me to wrap my mind around as an instructor, because I used to think, oh, if I do it for one student, I have to do it for everybody because that's equal. And that's actually not the mindset. The mindset is not everybody comes with the same privileges as other people. One of my colleagues calls it systemically non-dominant populations. And so I think it's really important that as instructors, we're always thinking about not being equal, but more about equity, more about how do I make sure that every student is learning in my classroom, and maybe I'm gonna have to go above and beyond. Okay, I need you to stop. Like, equity gaps in our classrooms, it's not because of capacity. If there are equity gaps in our classrooms, it's because of privilege and systemic inequities that perpetuate everywhere, and we're so used to them that they're invisible to us. It's the two fish swimming by each other, and one fish says, "How's the water?" and the other one's like, "What's water?" Like, the systemic inequities in our system are like water to those of us who come from systemically dominant populations. And so I think maybe that when I think about student success and I think about all students succeeding, I think part of it is really examining, where do I have deficit in my mindset? Where am I operating from a deficit perspective? And stripping that away from your pedagogy and your classroom artifacts is a rigorous iterative process, and we'll probably never get there 100%, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do that work anyway. So for me, student success is really about a rigorous self-analysis and a rigorous examination of my teaching, who I am in the classroom, the artifacts that I'm creating.